Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're looking at the groundbreaking work of a man whose ideas completely reshaped how we understand human nature, even if we usually only see the tip of the iceberg. I'm talking, of course, about Abraham Maslow. Now, most of us know his famous hierarchy of needs, right? That colorful pyramid you probably saw in a psychology textbook somewhere. But what Maslow himself called his unnoticed revolution was actually a massive paradigm shift. He desperately wanted to move psychology away from this dark, disease-focused view of humanity, this idea that we're just driven by neuroses and base instincts. Instead, he proposed a profoundly hopeful, humanistic worldview. He believed that humans have an intrinsic, higher nature. So today, we're going beyond the pyramid to uncover the deeper, often totally overlooked brilliance of his theories.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's a quick roadmap for today's explainer. 1. Rethinking science and psychology. 2. The whole person. 3. A deeper look at the hierarchy of needs. 4. The grumble theory. And finally, 5. True self-actualization.
Starting with Section 1. Rethinking science and psychology. Moving beyond technique.
To really get Maslow's view of human nature, we first have to understand how he completely challenged the orthodox, rigid rules of traditional science. He realized that the way we study humans fundamentally limits what we can actually discover about them. There's this massive trap that researchers fall into, and it's called means-centered science. This is the old way. It's essentially an obsession with the how. It focuses entirely on techniques, the lab apparatus, and strictly orthodox methods. And the problem is, when science gets stuck here, scientists turn into mere technicians. They start fitting their questions to their tools rather than creating new tools to answer the big questions. Contrast this with Maslow's approach, which is problem-centered science. This shifts the focus entirely back to the what and the why. It's about asking bold questions, exploring human values, and seeking actual truth, even if it's messy and doesn't fit neatly into a pristine lab experiment.
To drive this point home, Maslow actually relied on this incredible quote from Albert Einstein and Leopold Infeld. They said, "The formulation of a problem is far more often essential than its solution. To raise new questions marks real advance in science." Think about that for a second. It's a crucial foundation for everything we're about to cover. The real essence of science isn't just safely repeating the techniques of the past. It's having the courage to ask bold, groundbreaking questions about what it really means to be fully human.
Let's move to Section 2 and see how this builds. The whole person, the micro to macro paradigm shift. Now that Maslow had established this problem-centered approach, he applied his expansive thinking directly to human motivation, and it led to a massive micro to macro paradigm shift. Just listen to this. It is John Smith who wants food, not John Smith's stomach. I mean, it sounds so simple, right? But it was a radical departure from how psychology used to operate. Traditional atomistic science tried to isolate our basic drives. They studied hunger as if it were just a mechanical function of the gastrointestinal tract. But Maslow pointed out that this fails completely, because you literally cannot isolate a drive from the whole person. When John Smith is hungry, it's not just his stomach that's affected, his entire being changes. And this brilliantly illustrates Maslow's core framework, the holistic dynamic theory. This is the view that an individual is an integrated, organized whole. When you're starving, you're hungry all over. It changes your memories. You suddenly remember that great meal you had last week. It changes your emotions. You get tense, maybe a little irritable. It changes your perception. You notice the smell of a bakery from a whole block away. Motivation isn't just a series of isolated switches being flipped on and off. It is constant, it's never-ending, and it's deeply complex. All right, Section 3, the hierarchy of needs, the structure of human motivation. So, if we're these complex, integrated wholes, how is our motivation actually structured? Well, it operates in steps, almost like a set of nested boxes. We start with Step 1, the deeply prepotent physiological needs, things like food and safety. If you're starving, nothing else matters. Your whole reality is defined by finding a piece of bread. But once those are met, we move to Step 2, our everyday desires. These are the things we're consciously aware of wanting every day. A better salary, a nice car, a new pair of shoes. But what's absolutely fascinating is that these everyday desires, they're usually just channels. They lead us to Step 3, fundamental goals. Because you don't just want a car for the sake of metal and wheels. You might want it for status, which ultimately expresses an unconscious, fundamental goal for self-esteem, belonging, or love. But this brings us to a really pivotal question, and it's one that completely subverts the classic pyramid model most people are taught. What happens when all our basic needs are finally met? Think about it. What happens when you have the food, the safety, the car, and the esteem? Do we just sit back and exist in a state of eternal, peaceful bliss?
That brings us to Section 4, the grumble theory, the illusion of eternal happiness.
So the answer to that question leads us to a pretty surprising reality about what actually happens in the human mind after gratification, and it totally shatters the illusion of eternal happiness. Maslow coined this fantastic term for it, the grumble theory. It's the phenomenon where need gratifications lead only to temporary happiness. This happiness is inevitably and almost immediately succeeded by a new, higher discontent. We're constantly sold this idea in fairy tales, and they lived happily ever after. But Maslow says that is a complete illusion. Humans are wanting animals. The moment we get exactly what we've been striving for, sure, we might feel ecstatic for a brief window, but then we normalize it, and we just start grumbling for the next thing. And the crucial point here is that this happens not just individually, but on a massive societal scale. Throughout history, major social improvements were fought for with the belief that they'd bring a millennium of perfect happiness. When the labor movement won better conditions, workers were sated for a time, but then grew restless for more. The exact same thing was observed with early women's suffrage and major constitutional amendments. The achievements were monumental, obviously, but as humans, we quickly take our new blessings for granted. We forget the struggle, we drop the victory out of consciousness, and a brand new discontent arises. And because we're constantly grumbling, society often falls into a really dangerous cultural trap that Maslow called downleveling. This is the cynical tendency to explain away all human behavior by pointing to our lowest, most materialistic motives. If someone does something undeniably good, the cynic says, oh, they just did it for money or power or PR. It's an active debunking of human nature. But this cynical devaluation blindly ignores the fact that our innate, higher needs, like justice, beauty, truth, and love, are incredibly determinative and real. We aren't just driven by our lowest instincts, we are quite literally pulled upward by our highest potentials.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 5, True Self-Actualization, the pinnacle of human existence.
To truly understand the absolute highest, most complex level of Maslow's theory, a truly self-actualized person, we have to look at how they handle their impulses. We see a lot of sick impulsivity in modern culture. That's the idea that any control is repressive, so we should just give in to pure, uninhibited instinct whenever we feel like it. But contrast this with healthy spontaneity. Self-actualized people possess what Maslow called Apollonian controls. This means their controls don't repress their desires. They actually enhance gratification without endangering it. It's exactly the difference between eating a whole cake in a destructive binge versus savoring a single, perfect slice and truly, deeply enjoying it.
Now, what's really interesting about this concept is that self-actualization is virtually impossible for young people. Maslow found it almost exclusively in older people. And why is that? Because achieving this state requires time, responsibility, enduring romantic love, and, crucially, experiencing tragedy and failure. Young people just haven't had the time to shed their perfectionistic illusions yet. A fully mature self-actualized person is capable of profound gratitude. They are actually exempt from the grumble theory because they don't take their blessings for granted. A miracle remains a miracle to them, even if it happens every single day. They're unashamedly virtuous, and they know exactly what they value.
And this deep maturity is exactly why self-actualized people don't fall into the trap of demanding nirvana now. Demanding a perfect society, perfect parents, perfect friends, or a perfect life is just an illusion, because perfection simply does not exist in the human condition. When we rigidly demand nirvana right this second, it inexorably breeds disillusionment. And that disillusionment turns into depression, disgust, rage, and ultimately a desire for revenge against a world that won't give us the perfection we think we deserve.
I want to conclude our explainer today with this incredibly powerful quote from Maslow. He wrote, "If you demand a perfect leader or a perfect society, you thereby give up choosing between better and worse. If the imperfect is defined as evil, then everything becomes evil since everything is imperfect." It's such a profound warning for all of us. So here's my question for you. Are our own unrelenting demands for perfection actually blinding us to the possibility of a better, humanistic world? Remember, growth is a process, and by accepting the imperfect, we actually give ourselves the grace to keep moving toward our highest potentials. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.